few weeks ago, I picked up this really nice solid oak dresser from a gentleman. He had it since it was new. He bought it brand new, so he's had it for decades and decades. This is a really perfect example of the type of piece that I try to search for. Something that's solid, large, heavy, very clean, structurally sound. There's no repairs that need to be done to this at all. All of the drawers are really clean inside. It's got a lot of space, and it's in a nice, modern, clean style that could be used as a really good blank slate and fit into many different styles, many different homes, and could be taken in many different directions. For this particular piece, I think I am going to sand it down and reveal a more raw wood look. Currently, the finish, it's a little orange, it's a little dated per the times that this was created. But pieces like this can really make a wonderful transformation and a really, really good before and after. Stay tuned and let's see what we can do. I always like to label the bottom of the drawers with the position that they went inside the dresser. That way, if there are any slight differences in how the drawer tracks were initially installed by the manufacturer, I have it in the correct spot that it was meant to go. So I took this one out of the left side, L, space number 3. So this is the third drawer on the left side. Even though I plan on stripping or sanding this piece down all the way, I'm still going to give it a really good clean. You don't know what kind of dirt, grime, oils are on pieces like this, and you don't want to grind them down into the wood. It's just best to start with a completely clean surface. Today, I am cleaning with a TSP alternative. Just does a really good job creating a clean surface, but really any degreaser will work as long as you wipe it back really well with clean water when you are all done. Because I'm going to sand this dresser back, and since these drawer glides are metal with ball bearings, they have grease in them to help them slide. I don't want the dust to get in that grease or on those tracks. So I'm going to go ahead and tape them off right now before I start painting. That way they'll be protected. I'm going to start by sanding back the drawer fronts. I am going to use a 80 grit sandpaper. Because this is a solid wood piece, I don't have to worry about sanding through any thin wood veneers, so I can use something a little bit more aggressive. After I sand it back with 80 grit, I will go back in with something like 120 and then finish out with a 220 to make sure I minimize any sanding swirls or any rough patches that my more abrasive sandpaper might have brought up. I'm next going to start sanding the body of the dresser. Each piece is a little different, and how the finish sands off, what it's made of, if it's solid, if it has veneer, all play a factor into determining how I'm going to remove that finish. Sometimes I'll use a chemical stripper, sometimes I'll sand back. The finish on this piece was coming off pretty easily with just by sanding, and again, because it's solid, I have plenty of material to work with. I opted for sanding. Chemical strippers can be stinky and require a little bit of extra care when it comes to cleaning up after you strip them. They absolutely have their purpose, and I do use it, but in this particular situation, it just made more sense to sand everything back. When I started on the face frame on the front of the dresser, I did find it easier to take my rectangular shaped Surf Prep sander. It gets into those corners a lot easier than a round orbital sander will. It's not quite as abrasive as a orbital sander. That's really used to take off the finish on tops and large surfaces relatively quickly. But this little square sander does a fantastic job in corners and hard to reach places like this. There's always going to be a little bit of hand sanding that is required. Those electric sanders are not going to be able to reach every single nook and cranny. After everything has been sanded the first time with that 80 grit, I am going back through with the slightly higher grits, stepping it up one at a time just to smooth everything over. This whole process does take several hours. It's time consuming, it's a little labor intensive, but it creates a really nice finished product when you're all said and done. Now that the piece has been fully sanded down back to its raw state, um, I can now start to think about what kind of paint wash colors I want to use. I'd like to keep the natural look of this piece, just to highlight the natural beauty of this oak wood grain. If I were to just top coat this currently with just a clear top coat, it would change color and become a little bit darker and lean either a little bit more pink or red, which is something that I'm looking to not achieve. I want to neutralize those pink or red undertones. There are a couple of areas where the wood filler has come out that the manufacturer had put in initially. No areas that are failing. It's just this is a solid wood piece, so there was natural cracks or grooves in that tree when they milled it down, and it actually adds character to this piece, I think. But yeah, I'll refill those areas where the wood filler was coming out. I have a nice neutral beige color of paint. This is a chalk paint, a mineral paint, and it's about 20 to 30% paint, and I'd say 70 to 80% water. So it's nice and watered down. I'm going to give it a good stir, and I'm going to brush it on to the raw wood and wipe it back immediately. And this will leave just the slightest amount of paint left behind while still letting all of that wood grain show through. Now that that wood filler has dried, I will take a 220 grit sandpaper and just lightly sand that back, taking all the excess off the surface and leaving the filled parts still present in the grain. When paint washing large surfaces, it is really important to work quickly. Sometimes if it's really hot out and you find the paint wash to be drying quickly, I will mist down the surface of the wood with a very light misting of water. This will help to extend the working time of your paint wash. And then I try to wipe it back as soon as possible. I will wipe it back in the same direction that the wood grain goes, at least to finish it out. This will help to alleviate any spots where you can see buildup of excess paint wash that will have dried after the fact. Now that the paint wash has all dried, I'm going to top coat it with a water-based polyurethane in a satin sheen. I'm going to stir it really, really well. Make sure that all of the components are mixed together so that I don't get any uneven patterns when I spray this product. I'm going to strain my top coat through a paint strainer before spraying it through my sprayer. It might have some clumps, might have some dried product, and if that gets in your spraying system, it can clog up the nozzle and create some uneven spraying patterns. And in order to alleviate this, if you do find yourself having clumps in your sprayer, you have to empty out the entire sprayer and clean everything and restrain it all back in, and it can just make for a tedious process. Not to mention you might get clumps in your product as you're spraying. Now that everything has been sealed, I am going to go in with a water-based stain in a medium brown color. I did water down that stain quite a bit, about 50% water, 50% stain. This will help to prevent the stain from drying on me too quickly. I'm not looking for a super dark color. I just want it to tint my finish slightly, almost more of a glaze than a stain. So I'm going to apply this in even strokes and wipe it back relatively quickly with a clean paper towel just to pick up the majority of that product. It'll just leave behind the slightest warmth to bring that wood grain back to life a little bit. As I'm staining the top of this dresser, I'm going to work relatively quickly and going in long, even strokes in the same direction of the wood grain. And if it's a super hot day, I will either mist down the surface or I will only wipe on about half of the dresser top, wipe it back with a clean paper towel, and then finish the second half. It dries really quickly, these water-based products, and so you have to work with a liberal amount of product as well as wiping back as quickly as you possibly can, and working in small sections. Take it in chunks. Don't try to stain the entire piece all at the same time. Do the top, wipe it back, then do the sides, then wipe it back. The face frames, then wipe it back. You just take it in bite-sized pieces and it's not too bad. I'm now going to top coat with that same water-based satin top coat. I am going to probably do 2 or 3 more coats of this over that stain glaze that we put on. This will just help to seal it in and add additional protection to those surfaces that we just refinished. Now that everything is dried, I can go ahead and remove the tape from the drawer glides and start assembling everything back together. I'm going to thoroughly clean each drawer box inside and out, making sure there's no dust left over. And then I am going to line these drawer boxes. I like to leave a little bit of excess when I'm measuring for each drawer box. I'll usually oversize them by about 1/2 inch. This lets me cut away any excess and leave a really clean, lined bottom when I'm all done. Using this handy template, it has several predetermined common handle sizes. I will measure the center of my drawers and I will drill some guide holes in order to fully drill out the spaces for my brand new hardware to fit in. And that's it. The last step is to stage and photograph the piece. I find that staging really does help to elevate the pictures and allow people to envision what it might look like in a space, give them different styling ideas, and also will help to show how a piece might play with different colors, like these darker greens that I have in different staging materials. Let me know what you think. I think this piece turned out really nice. It went from an outdated piece to a much more modern finish. I could see this working in so many different spaces, in so many different rooms in a modern home today. Thanks for watching.